Got it.
Good morning. Hi,
Good morning. Oh,
this is
sorry.
good. I'm Linda Lambert, but you know that, Sean, and I'm talking with Sean DWYER, a good friend of mine, who has published a piece called The Beginner in Spring and All, the 2023 anthology that was written and edited by Red Wheelbarrow Writers and published by Sidekick Press. The Beginner is a nonfiction, kind of memoirish piece about Sean's young self, who was much troubled about learning how to swim. I enjoyed it a bunch. However, Sean is not a beginner in writing. He's published 15 short stories, maybe more now, since this has been published. He makes good faces too. And a fascinating story about his experience as a brain trauma survivor. It's called A Quest for Tears. That was a nice air. And I was going to have it handy, but I forgot to pull it off my shelf. It's a very good book. And I hope that people will look for it. I'll put this down now, but encourage people to get it at Village Vix or Books or Amazon or whatever. It's a really good collection.
It's an amazing book.
The theme of this anthology was uplift. And I'm wondering, Sean, how in your mind did your piece relate to the anthology's theme?
Yeah. I think that, well, what I tried to bring forward was the fact that I overcame a deep trauma. And I did it without any family support because I was at summer camp. And what I had was the support of a swimming mentor. And the way that story got to be uplifting was that I pretty much downplayed a lot of the behind the scenes trauma. What happened was I was taking a swimming lesson in a lake and standing in the mud and getting taught. And then a boat went by and just slammed a wave into me. And I was done. That was it. Because I was underwater suddenly. And I'm like, oh my God, I could die here. And so 2 years later, I went to summer camp, didn't learn to swim. Next year, didn't learn to swim. And by then I had a stepmother who was rather harsh, and she was kind of mocking me for not swimming, not being scared of the water. And I didn't, it's a phobia. That's different, right? And so, but I downplayed that a lot because what I was focused on was that actually, because of love, I triumphed over over the situation. And it was really one of the bigger accomplishments of my young life that I fought through my water phobia. So yeah, I thought it belonged in this book.
And apparently the editors did too. And this was a storied, a juried collection.
Yes.
Not everything was accepted. I remember when I first read it that you didn't say very much about what had happened to cause this trauma. All you said, I believe, was that you had almost drowned. And I thought,
Yeah.
oh, that's really interesting. So I'm glad to hear a little bit of the backstory, but I think you also made a good writerly choice in not talking about that too much.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I have written a number of memoirish childhood stories, and in some of them, I go into the fraught relationship with my stepmom. But since this is shortly after I met her, if I make a collection out of this, I can actually ease into that relationship by just hinting at her personality in this story. I don't think I would have to change it and belabor the point.
Yeah. Was this the first thing that came to your mind, talking about the overcoming of swimming?
For the anthology?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Because so many of my childhood memoir stories are not positive. Yeah, that
He
they wouldn't
says with a
work.
smile.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've published actually one was where I was helping my dad build a new bathroom for my grandfather and things like that. But there was one about oh, never mind. Yeah, some tough ones. Um, and I thought, well, I've written stuff that's amusing, but I haven't been overtly uplifting in fiction or whatever, not about me. And this piece, because it was so close to me, I could really get the point across. And so it seemed right. And in fact, when we first thought about the anthology, I missed the deadline and this wasn't going to get put in it, but then it got scraped clean and I got it in. So
A lot of people missed the deadline, and I decided not to write for it originally. I had a piece, but it just wasn't gelled, and I think the editors realized by the kind of material that they did work that they needed a slightly different theme, and I think that they came up with a really great one as we emerged from from COVID and so forth.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was a really good choice. When I remember when Laura said, we've done enough about the negativity of the situation with the poetry COVID book. And thought at that moment I said, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
let's really bring everybody up now. It
How
was great.
fluid was the writing of this story? I mean, that gets a little into what's your process for writing. Some
Mhm.
stories come fast, some come slower. How did this one go?
I started writing this maybe in 2002, and I never got it to where I was happy with it. And it really took having the notion that I was going to get that piece in shape for this anthology. That's what made it work. I sat down and I immersed myself the in the memory, and I have very vivid memories of most of my childhood, and so I was able to recall being in the cabin at camp and then going to the pool and all that stuff. And so what I do is frankly, I try to immerse myself in a mental place when I'm actually doing the writing.
Hmm.
Most of my writing is not calculated. I may have some thoughts on how I want a scene to go, but if it goes some other direction because of what the voices in my head are telling me, I just let it happen. But yeah, so it took a long time for this one to get put together, and it got finally hit the sweet spot for it.
It sounds like you've been writing for some time.
Started writing when I was 6. All right, I had ideas before that, but I didn't know how to write. So and I did that. And, I started. I composed a piece of music when I was 5, and I started writing as soon as I learned to read. And I wrote a little book about some animals that were in a forest fire when I was 6, and I showed it to my mom, and she's like, "Huh?" Because it wasn't a school, and it wasn't even nobody asked me to do it. I just sat down and did it. So yeah, but how long have I been a capable writer? That's a different story because, man, I didn't get much nurturing in my teens for my writing. Didn't think about I didn't even know about writing groups when I was trying to write my first novel. And it took quite a while for me to hone craft enough to be publishable.
Well, did you have any teachers that encouraged you in high school and
Yeah.
beyond?
My 6th grade teacher, my 4th grade teacher and 6th grade teacher both saw something there. And in 8th grade, I had uh, an English teacher that thought my work was intriguing because she had us writing a lot. And so I wrote some stuff for her and she encouraged me quite a bit. Then oh my goodness, my senior year of high school, one of my teachers, I was in an advanced composition class trying to write nonfiction, and she said, "Are you writing a novel?" And I said, "Yeah." "How do you know?" She said, "Just figured you would be." And so I took that, as a throwing down the gauntlet there. "Okay, Sean, write a book." And so that's when I started getting serious about trying to write longer works. So yeah.
Um, do you remember anything that you published first or had a thrill, whether it was, high school newspaper or anything?
Well, I sent a letter to the editor of our local newspaper complaining that my U.S. government class when I was a senior, the guy wasn't even teaching the Constitution, and they published it anonymously, thank goodness. But as far as real publication, I there was when I was in college, I entered a story in my dorm's creative writing contest, and I got third place, but I got $10. And then it was in 1992, I took as an elective what a class that was for the English MFA at Indiana University, and I wrote a piece for that got published eventually. And the crazy thing about it for me was that I got it published like so I had the class in 92, got it published in 96. And that was a big thrill because they handed me a $20 bill in return for my story. And I still have that $20 bill. I'm never going to spend that one. Not going to spend that one. It was such a huge moment. I got paid for a piece that's in a journal.
Yeah.
And but then, like in 1997, I saw my professor Cornelia Nixon at a restaurant in Bloomington, Indiana, breakfast place, and I said, "Hey, Cornelia, I got a story I wrote for your class published." She said, "Oh, the one about the rabbit and the blizzard?"
Whoa.
5 years later, it stuck with her. I was like,
Wow.
holy crap, So I said, wow, my words have some staying power. And that moment was one of the biggest encouragements I ever got. Yeah.
I wonder, I know you're a professor at Western Washington University,
I am.
and I want to talk a little bit about that, but what kind of jogged my memory here or my thought here is that you had positive feedback from a few teachers.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that you translate that into giving good feedback and encouragement to students. I've never met one of your students, but I just think because of knowing who you are, that might be so.
My students almost universally will say to me or on their evaluations that I'm really encouraging and they feel safe making mistakes in their Spanish in my class, because there is no sense in beating up on people who are trying to learn something. That is just the wrong way to approach it. And I think it delayed my writing a long time because of my home situation, where I just wasn't encouraged to do anything intellectual in the house. I was supposed to go out and play baseball, which I did, but I still wanted to read and write.
Yes,
So yeah.
you were not you did not feel that seed within yourself to be a famous baseball player or even an accomplished baseball player.
I dreamed about it, but I knew better. Yeah. But I had a much bigger, man. I don't know when I first fantasized about sitting next to Johnny Carson and talking about my first novel. That's
Ooh.
how far back I did that. It's like, yeah, so this is what I've done in my book, Johnny. Oh my God. Still
Some
waiting.
of those fantasies are they're little balloons of success that you reach for. You probably not going to be talking to Johnny Carson.
Not now.
I
In
know,
a seance.
not no in a seance. You mentioned, I think anybody who's listening who doesn't know you might think, okay, he's a writer, but he's teaching Spanish. I also happen to know that you've got a reputation as a polyglot, somebody who knows a lot of language, if I'm using.
Yeah.
So say a little more about that other interest that you have.
Yeah. When I was little, my mom, who I lost when I was 9, and that's way too bad for both of us, I guess. But her brother was in France in World War II after D-Day, and he gave her his little French English dictionary. And I devoured that little book. I was like, "Oh, wow, this is another language. It's so cool." So, and then I had a babysitter who was taking German, and she taught me to count to 100 and gave me some worksheets she had, mimeograph things. And then I had a babysitter who was proficient in Spanish. And so I started developing that area. Who am I going like this? Started developing my language center fairly early, which is when it's supposed to happen. And then in 9th grade, I took French, and halfway through the year, I said, I'm going to do the exercises that are not assigned as well, so I can learn faster. And then after 2 years of French, I added Spanish because I thought, I'm going to be an interpreter and I can do this. I can take these classes for free now. So I took 4 years of French, 2 years of Spanish, and for good measure, I added German my senior year of high school.
That's
And
pretty prescient.
yeah, it really was. I felt, I'd like not to say that it was the path of least resistance because I do work at it, but it was something that I was good at. I could learn a language pretty quickly. Once I got one in, I could just slam in another one. Like a couple of years ago, I picked up Swedish, and now I speak Swedish, more or less. I don't have anybody to practice with. There are not a lot of native Swedish speakers here, but so I did. Then when I got to college, I did those 3 languages, and then I had to do Latin for potential graduate work. And then I added Russian because I was getting complacent, thinking, why don't my students, well, all the grad students complain about how their students aren't learning. And I thought, well, I'm going to give myself that perspective of how hard it is to learn a language. So I tried Russian, had to learn an alphabet, had to learn their way of doing things. I did get an A, but I realized, it's not easy to learn a language. And that has stuck with me. I didn't ever get jaded about that. I know it's hard. And what did I do after the Russian? Oh, Portuguese. I picked up Portuguese, and in a couple of months, I was translating a poetry book. And then I've added Italian and Swedish and Irish since then. And I think Japanese will be next. So
I stopped counting after 6.
I have no idea. Somewhere like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted you to have Polish in the mix because I just made a friend in Madrid who sent me a package this week. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could respond to him in Polish, even though he speaks great English?
Google Translate is your friend. It's good enough now that it would look like a non-native actually writing it. Do it. Go for it.
I had some experience. This is about you, but a short story. Amory and I were taking the train down to Seattle, and there was the bus driver came on and said, this person is Spanish and doesn't speak any English.
Oh.
Does anybody on the bus speak English? Nobody did. So I got out my phone and used Google Translate all the way to the bus station, and then to get him from the Greyhound station to the bus station and then connect up with his family, I used Google Translate, and it was just a wonderful experience.
It really has gotten to be a good device for that now. So the other option is to call me.
I know, I considered calling you.
Jolene did call me from Chile when she got her backpack stolen.
Oh.
And I talked to the prosecutor down there to actually I talked to the police about how to get her to the prosecutor's office so she could file a complaint. So
no kidding.
That was cool.
I better take your number because I would have called you. Your name crossed our mind when we were on that bus, so I better get your
Yeah,
number.
sure, absolutely.
So how does learning a language dovetail with writing, or how does your brain work around those two things?
I believe that by learning the structures of different languages grammatically, I had to learn a lot of grammar uh, to be able to do those languages right. And that made my English really coherent. But I think it's just a facility with words. Um, my ability to express what I'm thinking is pretty good. It may not always be the most compelling story, but I can at least express it clearly. And then I work on making it compelling. Yeah, I just think that I'm a wordsmith, and having the opportunity to work on uh, work on words in a bunch of languages just gives me the ability to express myself more amply. So yeah.
Are there any are there any do you have a fight? Spanish is your main language, right? So
Mhm.
is that the
Yeah.
language you like to refer to the most, or can you quantify that?
Yeah, I can. Have been working on a novel in Spanish about a flamenco dancer in the 1940s in Madrid. And I'm not going to translate that to English until it's done, but it will be a translation into English because I'm writing it full on in Spanish and not even thinking in English when I write it. Hi, Freya. Um, and so, yeah, and I've written alternate versions of a couple songs with Spanish lyrics. Um, and yeah, Spanish is the one that I would feel most comfortable writing in. And so when people have questions about is this how you say that? I can tell them yes, or well, let's do it this way, things like that. So yeah, I enjoy writing in Spanish. It's a lot of fun.
I took 1 year of college Spanish, which did not make me loquacious, but I can
Oh,
recognize a few words.
yeah, well, 1 year really doesn't do it. And my students,
No, it
in
doesn't.
101 say, I want to be fluent. I say, honey, you need to spend 2 years abroad.
Oh
Then
yeah,
it'll happen.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we lived in Germany for a year, and by the time we left Germany, I could carry on not a terribly intelligent, but an understandable conversation, and I liked that.
I think that people need to learn to read and write so they're not, because if you just immerse and never learn to read or write, you are an illiterate person in the other language. And who wants to be illiterate? But yeah, you need to immerse abroad. Mhm.
I've never
Yeah.
thought of it like that, that you would then be an illiterate person. But
People
yeah,
who can't
that's
read and
true.
write English are considered illiterate. Yeah.
Mm.
So great.
Well, I have to ask a typical question. What authors do you like to read? How
Okay.
how wide is your span of reading?
I'd say it's pretty wide. Okay. So one thing when I was in high school, and the first Stephen King book I read was Salem's Lot. And uh when I was reading it, I saw his vivid language and the punchiness of it. I said, that is how I see myself writing. And so when I was writing, I would think, what would Stephen King do here? Like what word, what metaphor, what image. And in my 30s, ooh, a long time ago, when I was sitting down having trouble getting started on something, I would grab a King novel or short story. And as I was reading it, it would um, light up the writing center of my brain. So the best jumpstart for me was to sit down and read King. Um, in I'm almost more well versed in Latin American and Spanish authors because of my studies than I am in American novelists because I didn't take a lot of English lit in college.
Mhm.
But I so Jorge Luis Borges, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and a few others of that ilk are my go-to. That's what my still unfinished dissertation deals with, those people and the magical realism. But it's more about their language. I'm not trying to be a magical realist so much, although this novel in Spanish is. Um, but I am more, it's more the clarity of their prose, and they give me a perspective on how to write in a non-American way and yet be readable. And but in the US, well, right now I'm plowing slowly because of my brain injury through the Laura Kalpakian oeuvre. I grabbed all of her books. I have them all on a shelf, and I'm starting from the beginning. And I just love her work. I'm not trying to, suck up here. She's an absolutely spectacular author, and I love reading her.
I just bought
Um,
Ferragusto.
yeah, the new release of it.
Release, yeah.
Yeah, I have the original. I
1986, I think it was.
yeah. I'm so glad that she's getting these back out, and they're gorgeous books. They've done a really good job with her work there, and
Yes.
having a coherent collection that is similar in style, in the design.
Mhm.
It's wonderful. So, but who else apart from King? Oh, well, I have read every Agatha Christie novel, all 80 some.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, and that was because I was fascinated by the whodunit, and so I actually have a series that I'm going to finally get put together here. So yeah, people like that. But man, there's so many people that I want to read more. Oh, James Joyce, his early stuff where he's not too experimental is absolutely magnificent writing, and I'm trying to work through. I think Ulysses is just going to have to be audiobook only for me because I understand it better when I hear it than when I try to read it. But so him, a lot of Irish authors. And what other British? Oh, I like people like Dorothy L. Sayers and a few others. Oh, I like the horror people, the old horror, like M.R. James and oh, uh, Sheridan Le Fanu and things like that. Just yeah, okay. So
Have you read Stephen King's book on writing? You probably have.
yes, I have, and I learned a ton from that. Yes. In fact, I read it while I was down with a case of the flu, which gave it another dimension. I was hallucinating through it. It's fun. Yeah.
Uh, uh, do you have any quirky writerly habits that we should know about?
I think I probably do. The first one would be when I'm really going well on a piece, I'll get up in the morning and go straight in and write. And so let's say that's at 5 in the morning. And then by 9, I start to get woozy because I haven't had any food or beverage. And and so then I finally take a break to get breakfast. Um, but what else? Well, when I sit down to write, I usually play not a really simple video game for a few minutes because somehow it just takes my brain away from trying to overthink whatever I'm writing about. And then all of a sudden I'm ready to go and go through it. Yeah. But I learned from Stephen King that even though Hemingway liked to write drunk and edit sober, I rarely drink anything alcoholic while I'm writing because King said, well, he did coke, and I'm certainly not going to be the one to do that. But he said, if you have a vice that can be addicted, you need to avoid it while you're writing because you'll start to depend on that. You won't be able to write without it. And I think that's smart.
He also
So
used to write with very loud music.
yeah, and I cannot write with anything with lyrics
Yeah.
because it distracts me from the voices in my head again. I occasionally will listen to maybe some Mozart, but I just can't listen to. I could not put on AC/DC and get any writing done. It could not happen.
Um, what else would you like to tell us about yourself?
About me?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, um, I the weirdest thing that ever happened to me was in 2004. My sister and my stepmom found in our attic my baby book that my mom had meticulously filled out until she got sick. And in there was my horoscope for my birthday in 1960.
Ooh.
And I looked at that and it said born today, and then they used a misplaced it was a dangling modifier. Born today, um, the arts and business will be of great interest to you. In fact, you will be uh, so it's something like you will be really supportive of other artists, especially giving more energy to them than to yourself if you think they're more talented than you are. That was written about me in 1960, and yeah, that was an extreme. That's pretty explicit
Yeah.
for a horoscope, right?
Yeah.
And and then and then and what do? I run the Village Books open mic, and we just started one for kids an hour earlier at 5 p.m. on the last
Oh, great.
Monday
I
of the month.
saw that.
And I feel like I really feel now, especially like I'm carrying the torch of that for Laurel Lee because she did it for so long, and then with a short interlude, and then I took it over, and I've done it 6 years now, and I I just and just hearing everybody's work and what they're trying to accomplish with their writing. I love it, and I'm leading Whatcom writers and publishers because somebody had to, and I want the organizations to continue. And I've done the write outs to help Red Wheelbarrow writer people get a chance to get away and sit and work for a while and things like that. So one of the biggest things in for me is to be a supporter of other writers, and yeah, it's super important to me. So I guess that's the other thing about me, that the other side of the writing coin is the supporting other writers coin. So there we have it.
And I think that the writing community owes a lot to you for the leadership roles that you have taken over. You just seem to step in when it's needed. And
If I had a long sleeve, I'd roll it up, get on with it. Yeah. Yeah, I really try. And maybe sometimes I don't get accomplished what I want to because I over promise, but that's all, out of with the best of intentions. So
absolutely. So
yeah.
now I think it's time for you to read a little bit of something that you have written that will give readers a taste for the work.
Okay. Well, since I'm planning to, I have a series of um, cozy mysteries coming up that I already have 6 titles and 6 plots, and they're all puns on French cuisine. And so this guy, he turns out, from the time I concocted him in 2013 until now, he said he developed a traumatic brain injury that made him have to retire from the police force. So, gee, so I think that'll also give us some TBI awareness as I write this book. So yeah, I'll read 3 or 4 paragraphs here real quick.
Good.
This book is called The Belgian Baffle, and on the cover is going to be a Belgian waffle. Right. And so there's this Belgian chocolatier who got killed. So Steve North opened his refrigerator. Behind the carton of organic milk, he saw a plastic tub of leftover hash browns. It took so long to cook potatoes that he generally heaped 3 portions into his skillet and cooked them up with onion. When had he prepared this batch? If today was Saturday, he counted on his fingers, he had fried the potatoes on Wednesday. The 3-day rule was in effect, but did it matter with potatoes? What could go wrong with fried potatoes? Steve poured some olive oil into his skillet, then scraped the contents of the tub into the oil. These potatoes never tasted as good if he microwaved them. He was sitting to eat his breakfast when the doorbell rang. His fork flew out of his hand and landed on the kitchen tile. The doorbell rarely rang. People who didn't know him knocked, and hardly anyone he knew stopped by unannounced. It had to be his twin brother, Jeff. Yep. So we have Steve North and his twin brother, Jeff, identical twin, is still a cop. And Steve is called in because he can get to the Occam's razor of a problem just like that in a way that nobody else on the force can. And so they hire him as a consultant. And he gets pulled into this murder scene, and he solves it for the city and learns to do French cooking, because his problem now is that he can't keep track of his food supply that he has cooked, and so he's eating a lot of spoiled food and getting sick frequently. So they say, you're either going to take a health department food safety course, or you're going to do a cooking class. And he chooses the cooking class, and that's when he gets into French cooking. And so all these books. Yeah, there's some people that I know in the mystery world are pretty excited about the series. All I have to do is actually sit down and do it.
Well, it sounds like you have a good start, and some classic lines in there like, what could go wrong with fried potatoes?
You'll find out in about an hour.
Well, I can't wait that long, but I sure have enjoyed this time with you.
Thank you, Linda.
I look forward to more conversations. You are rich with anecdotes and stories, and I like to talk with you, and I also like reading your work. So
thank you.
Let's hope we have many more chances.
Yeah. Thank you. Came to my birthday party last year, and I was really honored by that. So thank you.
It was fun. See ya.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.